Now you're loud and clear. So how you doing, man?
Doing all right. Trying
Yeah.
to keep my head above water, and I don't know, winning
Yeah.
some medals, but it's not an easy thing to do.
It isn't, but thanks for joining, man.
Yeah. It's been a half a decade or more since I've talked to you, I think. So this
Yeah,
is
yeah. I
good.
don't I don't know if you remember this, but the last time we saw each other, I'm gonna test you here, was in the USA house, okay?
Yes.
And medals were won in Sochi, and we were there.
Yep.
I was with speed skating, and it's kind of like a blast from the past. All of a sudden, I see bobsled on the screen there. You guys walk in, and the ladies won medals, and they come in, and it was awesome. But the funny thing about that time was I was talking to you and someone came up for an autograph. I don't know if you remember this specifically, but they wanted an autograph. The gentleman thought I was an athlete, and you made a joke, or I made a joke that I'm Curt Tomasevicz, and he was so excited and bobsled, and I signed. I had to sign your name, which can be a challenge if you don't do that, and it was pretty funny. I don't remember if you signed it as me or something, but if that person's out there, I think they had had a few drinks. So
Yeah, that's what I remember them being a little intoxicated, and I could have told them that that I was Eric Hayden, and they would have
yeah.
said, "Yeah, I want your autograph."
The only thing close between you and I physically is maybe age. Otherwise, you're a massive, massive person, and I'm just a little dude. And but if that guy needs a new autograph, maybe we should kind of search him out. I don't know. So for everyone watching, this is Curt Tomasevicz. He's an Olympic spirit. He's a legend. The role you played in redefining what US bobsled is, and just your athletic ability, and now you're in an important role with bobsled where you're the high performance director. Is that accurate? And can you
Uh,
explain, what you do now and what your role is, and then how you got into bobsled? Because it's very interesting.
I'll start at the end, the present right
Sure.
now, and then jump to the beginning. So technically, my title is Director of Sport Performance, and
Okay.
every NGB has a high performance director,
Mhm.
and our within Bobsled and Skeleton, most of those duties fall under my umbrella. Some do still fall under the operations director, Morgan Tracy, in Bobsled Skeleton as well. But yeah, it's in many ways I describe it as the athletic director. I'm doing everything I can with scheduling, with working with coaches, with technology and equipment, recruiting and development plans, and that sort of thing. Trying to put all the pieces in place so that our athletes can push and drive, and our coaches can coach. And that's kind of how I see my role, is to kind of facilitate a lot of that and give them the pieces and tools they need.
Okay. So if you're like the athletic director, are you helping to build the team, the staff, the coaches, or are you focusing on trying to get performance out of the program? I don't know.
All of that, I
Or
guess, performance is the number one goal, right? So
mm,
so I'm again, it's a matter of recruiting athletes, looking for 4 and 8 years and 12 years into the future, and then
sure.
at the same time, helping our coaches have the right plan in place, making sure our athletes, again, we have a technology plan too, to build new sleds, to get the right runners, to put all of that, as the big package,
Okay.
because our sport is not just push and drive and hop in. There's a lot that goes into it that makes it necessary to have a high performance director.
Yeah, I would have people always ask me about the different sports I was involved with, and they recognize US athletes. We have a lot of them, but we're thinned out. I mean, the talent pool has to be like, you have to work with it. Speed skating has its challenges of getting kids on the ice, so they have
Yep.
programs. Bobsled, I met you in probably 2007, somewhere in Europe, started work. This is before you guys won medals. And I think you were winning some World Cup medals. And it seemed like it was these athletes from, say, football. You were a running back, you were a fullback, I believe. You played linebacker at Nebraska.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you're 100% right. I think one of our limitations, our biggest limitation, is we have 2 tracks in the country, and that's it. Lake Placid, New York, and Park City, Utah. And if you're not close to those tracks, sometimes it's hard to get athletes into the sport. And we always say that we have so many athletes that have been training for bobsled or skeleton their entire life, they just don't know it. Because we just want that power athlete, right?
Yeah.
So football, track, it doesn't matter, baseball, volleyball, soccer, whatever it is. A lot of athletes are the right body type to be a good bobsledder, but they've just never tried it. So it's our job to find those athletes. And you're right, to go back to your question a little bit ago, that's how I got started. I was played football at Nebraska as a running back for a couple of years and a linebacker for a couple of years. And honestly, I was recruited because I was bored and a girl talked me into it. And that's not the recruiting pipeline that we want. We want to be a little more formal with a plan and a process. So that's when I started, was 2004. And it took me a couple of years to truly understand the sport and learn a lot of the nuances that come with being an elite bobsledder.
Yeah.
And so by 2006, 2007, we started to be pretty successful and continued from there.
I mean, when you look back at that time, I saw you maybe 2007, 8 into 9, and then I saw you guys in Vancouver, and this is when it happened. There was a huge drought. I always get the years wrong, but a 46-year drought, gold medal drought in bobsled. Is that accurate? And then
I think it was 1948 was the one before us, and I think so that'd be 62 years.
I messed that up.
But who's counting, right? None of us were.
I looked it up to make sure today, and my source was incorrect. 62. I thought it was 62, if I were to remember. But you guys went into Canada and won, and you're a push athlete, and the host country just has so many more runs on the bobsled track. And relative to, say, Canada, who is strong and was strong then, what can you say about 2010? How special was it to do what you guys did?
There was a lot of pieces that I don't want to call it luck, but there's a lot of pieces that happened to fall into place for us, in 2010. Part of it was the location of the Olympics, just being close to the US, that made logistics easy for us. We could train in the same time zone prior to the Olympics. The food was a little more close to American, and things like that really just helped our performance. On top of that, there was about 50 people from my hometown and my home county that came up to the Olympics, and those little things helped too. But you are right, the host country, they get an unlimited number of practice runs, but all the other countries are usually limited to usually less than 40 practice runs.
And it's not like you can't just do a ton of runs anyways. I mean, it's a physical ride. You take a beating. Yeah.
And so it's almost not necessarily limited runs, it's limited days,
Okay.
And you can only do a couple runs a day really, and be at your best. A lot of people don't realize how just neurologically taxing bobsled is. Physically it's tough. You get beat up pretty hard. Yeah. But when you get done with a couple runs, you're just kind of fried, and it's such an adrenaline rush and so exhilarating. You go home and you're tired, just from basically 2 minutes of competing, and it's not an easy thing to do. So just a couple runs a day is a lot. So that's one of the limitations too.
It was just so impressive, the physical specimen of a bobsledder, the women, the men. I mean, just the muscular size of them, but the stature, but then combining size and speed. And when you guys have a testing program, I mean, you guys test athletes. You would always hear you and Steve Langton, from my experience, always were really good testers. Is that accurate? And then you hear the history of Herschel Walker and bringing an amazing athlete in. Does the testing that you do, I know you guys have 4 or 5 main tests, but does it apply to performance? I mean, does it translate accurately?
Yeah, so you're really getting into, again, some of the limitations we have, right? If you can't test a bobsledder while bobsledding, how do you recruit? How do you find these athletes? So yeah, in the past we've had these recruiting combines. We test a 40-yard dash, we test a 15-meter sprint, and some variations of sprinting. And then we also have like a two-hand underhand shot toss and vertical jump, and but you look back and like, just because I can throw a shot doesn't mean I'm a good bobsledder, right? So it's really hard to pinpoint what characteristic we're looking for when we recruit. We just want sprinting power, and that's it. And so I can tell you now, in the role that I have, I'm looking to actually incorporate a lot of velocity-based training and force velocity profiles. And I know that's kind of the new direction of a lot of strength and conditioning coaches. They're going that way. And so I think measuring sprinters with resistance now basically is the best way for us to do that. And technology is coming around where like devices like the 1080 sprint, where you can measure velocity while applying resistance. I think that's going to be a huge tool for us to in a way eliminate some of those combine events that sure, again, you can have a good vertical jump and again the underhand shot toss, that's always one I come back to. Like it may not play a role in pushing ability. So,
because I have the list here. You have like a 45-meter sprint, and you'll measure it from like 0 to 15, 0 to 30, 15 to 45. Is that still used?
Again, we do variations based off
okay.
Our coaching staff at the time. We like to have top end speed measured, so we need a flying 30.
Sure.
But at the same time, we don't usually sprint very long. So if we're only sprinting 45 meters, flying 30 isn't a true top end speed from 15 to 45. You're still accelerating there. So
okay. And then there's like a broad jump you guys do, and like a shot toss. I think you're referring to that underhand, like you're just tossing a heavy weight. I assume. I think it's like 16 pounds, and then body strength and power, like a power clean, a back squat. I mean, So you guys have different science you're trying to apply, you're trying to use. Is the athlete changing since when I saw you guys over a decade ago? Has it? Because I would always be like, wow, if there's this linebacker that didn't have great lateral movement but could fly like the wind, could they be a good bobsledder?
That's who we're looking for. Those 210 to 240 pound, athletes that can sprint. On the men's side, obviously, and on the women's side, we're looking for 160 to 175 pounds, or somewhere in there, I guess. If they're a combination of a powerful weightlifter and a sprinter or something like that, that's who we look for. So it's I'd say the athlete type hasn't changed much in the last decade or so, but how we test those athletes and how we train those athletes, that's starting to change maybe a little.
Okay. Yeah. Because we've seen, whether it's just strength and conditioning, more people are doing Olympic weightlifting at a younger age, whether it's CrossFit or cross training. And it's interesting because I started with USA weightlifting, and it's just this sport that no one even remembers, in the general community, but it's being applied more and more to high schools, younger programs, in a safe way. And then you're seeing people trying to compete with those type of Olympic movements. And is the pool actually big? I mean, are those athletes out there? We just have to get exposure, or is it? I don't know. Is there any other bottleneck?
Yeah, and I think that's where we've really been lacking was our exposure. A lot of people see us as popular for 10 minutes once every 4 years, and
sure,
and that's about it. And so I think I'm actually hoping to work a little bit more with the NSCA, strength and conditioning coaches, so that they can be our recruiters. Every college, every program, your local gym even can have some kind of recruiter that can help you get noticed, get recruited, and even train you to be a bobsled or skeleton athlete.
Yeah, because it seemed like a lot of the athletes just have a second shot, a second career, and it's super legitimate sport. I grew up in the Northeast in the 1980 Olympics. The hockey just dominated our community, that vision. And then watching you guys do what you did just was awesome. It's like the very similar moments to me, just how emotional it was. I wasn't, I was 1 year old in 1980, but with what you guys did, it's just yeah, every 4 years, people do get excited, but how do you keep the interest? One person on that, Steve Holcomb, is someone that I don't know if people realize what he's meant to the sport, and tying into him and what he means to the program. Can you relate it to like the challenge of sliding sports and finding pilots? Because there's only 2 tracks in Germany. They just have hundreds of kids. I think they start out on luge, and then if you're too big, throw you in a bobsled. And is that accurate? And what did Steve, growing up near Salt Lake or in Salt Lake, I mean, what did he do for the sport? I know you guys were close.
So first of all, you're right. I think, driving a bobsled and in a skeleton sled too, for that matter, it's more by feel than it is just by sight. And, so we've been told, well, why don't you recruit, race car drivers, NASCAR drivers, go-kart drivers, something like that. But what they don't realize is, you can see a curve coming in a bobsled, and you can actually, steer the runners and, make the runners turn, but you're on ice. So you're just going to skid, and it's not going to do anything. You have to wait until you feel the G-forces and the pressure and know what the sled is doing, to be able to steer a sled. And we have so far not been able to develop any kind of simulator or testing system, or even pinpoint what, the physiological characteristic we're looking for in a pilot, other than just take runs and see if you're good at it. That's the cut and dry way of doing it. And, other countries, you're right. They'll take 100 athletes, send them down and see who survives, and keep pushing that way. We don't have that luxury. And so, you mentioned Steve Holcomb. His driving ability it's incredibly hard to put into words, because, he could, it took him a few years, of course, but, he got to the point where, he could walk a track and, and have it dialed in much faster than other pilots. And I think, going back to what we were talking about before, limited runs on the track in Vancouver, that's what gave us an advantage, was how quickly Holcomb could pick up that track and drive it well. And it gave us a big advantage there.
Yeah. Well, we miss him. And I remember him talking about his sight, and when he could see better, he was like, I can actually see now. And he's combining it with his feel, and it was just like amazing.
So he had that degenerative eye disease, which, arguably we always said, it may have made him a better bobsledder by not, seeing as much as other people. And, because he wasn't overwhelmed with the visual cues that were coming in, and it forced him to drive by feel and not just by sight. So, he had a, corrective procedure done to restore his sight a little bit. And, right away after that, he kind of went through a slump of driving. Oh. And, he always said that, well, it's, I'm getting overwhelmed with seeing everything now, and I need to just go back to driving by feel. And, there's a few times, there may be more rumors or legendary stories now about him scratching up his visor or fogging it up, so he wasn't seeing. I don't remember him doing that, but I like that part of the story,
Yeah. I like that. That's like, he is a story at this point, and hopefully he's a great example. I know he grew up near the track, so that's kind of the point, is there's only 2 tracks, and I think the Placid one was refurbished, 10 years ago or longer, and there's probably no plans to put a third one in because they're so expensive, right? And
it's really only the host countries or host cities, have a reason to put in a bobsled track. And right now there aren't any other cities right now that are looking to host the Olympics.
The night train was the sled, and from what I understand, the technology made a big difference at the time. And then you look in 2014, you guys went from gold to silver. You said a lot of things went right for Vancouver to work out as they did.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of things fell into place for Vancouver, and our sled was one of those things. The Jeff Bo-Dyn sled project that started in 1992 finally developed a 4-man sled that was ready to roll by 2008, 2009. And that was just perfect timing for us to jump in that sled. Our team was coming together. We had Holcomb as our pilot. We were pushing, top in the world. So, to have that, the night train sled for the 2008 season, 2008, 2009, and then 2009, 2010 seasons, that was perfect for us. And again, it was, that in itself is a great story. Having that sled kind of come around and kind of get a persona of its own. Teams would look at us as Team Night Train and not just Team Holcomb or even Team USA. We were Team Night Train. And that was pretty cool to have that.
Did you rely on technology? I don't know the situation with your sleds right now, but I believe the Bo-Dyn project came from like a NASCAR background. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So Jeff Bo-Dyn was a NASCAR driver. I think he won the Daytona 500 in the early 80s. Basically, in 1992, he was tired, or at least watching the Olympics on TV, and was tired of learning that the United States had to buy foreign-made bobsled. So he decided to use his race technology to make some bobsleds. And again, that started in 92 and was part of the medal-winning teams in 2002, 2006, and then a gold medal finally in 2010 for the four-man competition. Okay. Then 2014, we continued, and we had kind of the next generation. We called it Night Train 2. And Night Train 1 is an original name. That was pretty creative. Night Train 2 could have done better with the naming of it.
But that's your job now, is the naming.
Yeah. So again, we were doing well. Silver medal. You can't really complain about that.
No.
But hoping for another gold there. But yeah, and then I did retire as an athlete 2014. I was part of selection committees and board of directors and some volunteer roles. Still very involved with the sport. And then for the last 7 years, but I officially became director of sport performance about 7 months ago.
Okay.
So not a long time in this role.
Well, congratulations. But the coaches, former athletes right now, Mike Cohn coming from he was on, I think, the bronze medal sled in Salt Lake. The US took silver and bronze. And then, you have a lot of people that were athletes involved in the sport. Is that obviously the talent pool for coaching? Can you discuss that? Like, why? I mean, it's hard for me to teach a bobsledder how to be a bobsledder as much as I care about it. Can you explain that?
Yeah. And, in some sports, you can be a good coach and never have been an athlete. That's not, it's kind of rare, but, at the same time, that does happen. The bobsled world is pretty small. So, our coaching pool is usually our former athlete pool. That's the reality of it. And oftentimes it is foreign coaches as well. So foreign athletes become American coaches too. That's not uncommon. So it's not easy to coach bobsledding. Well, it's not easy to, drive a bobsled, as we talked about, but, trying to communicate to an athlete, how to feel, a certain curve is a very difficult thing. And we have, you mentioned Coach Kahn, he was a pilot, but Brian Shimer, who was the pilot of that 2002 bronze medal sled, he's probably our lead driving coach right now. And he has a way of communicating with athletes that's, he's kind of like Yoda, he just kind of gives little body motions or kind of grunts a little bit and does some kind of demonstration, and athletes understand what he's saying. And, I spent a short time as a driver, and so I never got that language. But yeah, Shimer is really good at giving that communication. I mean,
he has that run in Salt Lake where he made up a lot of time, I think, off the push and pulled that medal out. Was that one of the best, runs ever for him to make up that speed? I know there's movies about it. Do you have any insight into that? And you're talking about he has this way to communicate, so he has feel, and he's the coach. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that was a little. I started the sport 2004, but you're same way. Like I've seen the video 100 times of Shimer. I think he came back from 6th place on the very last run to get that bronze medal. And in bobsled, that's making up a lot of time.
Yeah.
In one run.
Yeah.
And it's funny, we've since he was done competing in 2002, he still drives a sled periodically for sled testing.
Okay.
And I've been in the 2-man sled with him, and he's always disappointed in himself when he taps a wall. Most drivers, they're excited when they get down on all 4 runners, but Brian was he's disappointed when he just makes the smallest mistake. He's that good.
People don't realize that you can have the strongest push, but if you hit every wall, you could come and, last or whatever, it matters. And speaking of that drought, was the original team back in the day, like it was 1948 in St. Moritz, were any of those four athletes on that sled involved? And did you guys communicate with them when the night train won gold?
Honestly, and I'll say sadly, I've never met any of those guys. So
do you know their
pretty
names?
awesome to. No,
I know their names. So I'm gonna tell you though. Francis Tyler, I can't. Patrick Martin, Edward Ruckus, and then William D'Amico. So yeah, and St. Moritz seems to be like a place where you guys do win a lot of medals. Is that the same track? Is that?
I believe so, and I can say that with some confidence because that track in Switzerland is the only natural track, and so it's the same path cut through the trees.
Sure.
But every year they rebuild it with blocks of ice. Every other track in the world is concrete with piped refrigeration, and but in Switzerland they actually go to a nearby lake, cut out huge chunks of ice, and pack in the snow and freeze it down, and that's how they make their track. So I can, I feel like I can say that, yeah, that would be the same track.
Okay.
Or same path. It's melts
sure.
every year, but yeah.
Sure. It can't be the exact same track. The new event, the monobob. Obviously, I always wondered why women didn't have a 4-man or 4-woman event, and I assume and I've read this a little, but that it's due to simply because there's not enough countries that can field 4-person sleds or enough of them. But the monobob, can you explain why that was introduced and what it means for the sport?
Yeah, and I think the story behind monobob is came from two different directions at the same time, and it kind of worked out that way. But yeah, one of them was, up until these last Olympics, men had 2-man and 4-man, women only had 2-women bobsled. And so, that's obviously discrepancies. So they tried for a while to introduce 4-woman bobsledding. And for, initial steps, they tried, mixed gender sledding, with female pilots and to try to get it up off the ground. But it was kind of looking like the United States, Germany, and basically Canada were going to dominate the sport.
They
had a little more funding. They had better athletes. So a lot of smaller countries or less competitive countries, they didn't see the reason to put forth funding if they're not going to be in medal contention. So that they decided to almost work backwards. Instead of 4-women bobsled, they'd go with mono bobsled. At the same time, the adaptive sports. So, we're not calling them Paralympic sports just yet because bobsled and skeleton are not in the Paralympics yet. There's always a movement to try to get them in, but adaptive sledding was trying to develop, and for safety reasons, there's a lot of complexity that goes into those rules. How do you make a fair 2-man sled race? If one athlete is an amputee below the knee and another amputee is missing an arm or something. So they decided to take the same route with monobob. Well, now at least you can regulate to some degree. You can eliminate some of those variables a little bit. So yeah, both adaptive bobsled, Paralympic bobsled, as well as women now have monobob.
And it's a sled that the country doesn't develop. They all use the same sled, so it kind of evens the playing field. Now it's straight up like who can push and who can drive. And
that was another thing that they said, if we're going to do monobob, let's regulate the sleds so that technology, at least the funding that goes into technology, isn't as huge. So again, these smaller countries can participate. So the sleds all have the exact same body. We can change, some things with the steering, as well as the runners that we use. But yeah, for the most part, the sleds are the same. So again, now these smaller countries, and it's going to be seen coming up here in Beijing. There's going to be countries. Well, for example, in the race most recently in Lake Placid, Vietnam had a sled. China's got a couple, of course, and Nigeria and Brazil and Jamaica, countries that you would never think would be bobsledding, they can now have a team and almost hopefully be competitive as well. That's
great. It's going to likely grow the sport. And I hope it helps. I'm excited to see. I know Alana did well in it. And can you talk about her a little bit? Obviously, she's been very productive in the Olympic Games, 2 silver, 1 bronze. Can you explain her as an athlete and how she supported the program so well?
Yeah, she's one of the few athletes that are still competing that I overlapped with a little bit. So I know her not only in the role that I'm in now, but also again as a teammate for a while too. And back in the mid 2000s, all the way through 2021 and into 2022 here, she's incredibly strong, incredibly fast, and a competitive nature that it makes it perfect for bobsled. She spends countless hours trying to understand and learn from mistakes, as well as do all the little things that it takes to take care of her body and recovery and that sort of thing, which is saying a lot because in the last year or so she became a mother too.
Exactly.
And so she's got a lot on her plate. She balances life and sport as good as anybody I've ever met.
And this is Alana Meyers Taylor. I know her as Alana Meyers, and as she was young, this is before she's won 3 medals when we got to work with her, and she's just so funny and nice and positive attitude. And the few times I've caught up with her, I think that same day at the USA House, it was just so good to see her in her glory, having done well. And it's like, man, for me, it's really happy when I see you guys succeed at what you're trying to do. A lot of the medical staff, we have no control over any of the performance other than being present, supporting you guys, and doing the best we can. But she's someone that I always have great memories of and for, and I'm happy she's done well. So do you guys have an Olympic trials at all? Is that happening?
Our trials are different than other sports.
Sure.
Well, almost every sport is a little different. We don't have a single day trials like track and field or swimming would. We have a season long process, and there's steps along that way. Basically throughout our international competitive season, we have to qualify quota spots for the Olympics. And then it's up to each country to determine who goes and who competes in those spots. So it's a combination of us trying to evaluate all season and try to pick out the best athletes, and at the same time perform well to qualify those quota spots.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to do. We have to have the team picked. I think January 17th is our deadline this year. And at that time we'll have 8 World Cup races will have taken place, as well as a number of other testing, individual and team testing that we have done up to that point. So hopefully by then we have the right pilots as well as push athletes and skeleton athletes to go to the games.
Can you explain what the military elite athlete program has meant to your program? I mean, this is something that most people aren't probably very aware of, or that a lot of these athletes are members of our military, and they're supported as important, participants in defending our country. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's definitely a win-win kind of situation for us as well as the military. And I think Army, Air Force, and Marines, I believe, they all have what we call WCAP, World Class Athlete Program.
Sure.
And basically, they're athletes that decide to join the military. And it's a risk because they go through basic training. They go through everything as a normal soldier would. And then if they are elite enough within their sport, they can qualify for this WCAP program. And now their job in the military is basically to represent the U.S. as an athlete. And again, it's really difficult to do. And it's risky because at any time they could be called up, to go on tour or to, serve in another capacity. But at the same time, they are financially supported from that program.
Yeah.
And, it does serve toward their time in active duty as well. So it's a really great program. We have coaches as well as athletes in the program too. And it's a huge supporter for us.
Yeah. With Mike is Shauna Roebuck, that was the first time I had heard of the program. And it just seemed brilliant because they had the financial support, but they were, it's a priority. If they needed them, they had to serve. So I respect everything they've done. I'm thankful that the your program has benefited so much from it. Why does that type of athlete do well? Is it like a toughness? Is it a mentality? Is it a commitment? Is that what a bobsledder's personality kind of looks like?
I think, yeah, a lot of it goes hand in hand with what it takes to just be an elite athlete, period. You need that mental toughness. You need to know that you can be pushed to the limit and, and come out on top. There's that competitiveness, and also, American pride too. All those things go into a soldier and they come into being an elite athlete too.
I mean, it's a pretty tight knit group, a tight community. I remember treating the athletes with a lot of the other teams I've worked with. It's kind of me and them, and we're in a hotel room in whatever country or wherever. And I remember bobsled just kind of always being around each other and hanging out and very accountable and taking care of their body. A lot of them were interested in sports science. Do you think that's accurate? Because I saw an article with you, what was it, SI Kids, where you talk about meditation and breathing techniques where you like to help decrease your nervousness.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
well, okay, to answer your question in a bigger scope, one thing that's unique about our sport is a lot of our athletes do come to the sport after college too. So a lot of our athletes are, college educated, and, they may be more interested in, in the science behind it, and willing to study, all the small things that come with it too. And yeah, that's, taking care of every minute detail was something that I took pride in, whether it's, it's not just our lifting programs and our sprinting programs, but then it's how do you recover from those so that you can lift the next day. It's scheduling in, believe it or not, naps and recovery throughout the day so that you're at your peak when you need to be. It's eating the right things. It's mentally, using imagery and, meditation to picture what it's going to be like pushing, when all the pressure is there. You're picturing the noises and the smells, and, if something goes wrong, how to handle it, and, what kind of music are you listening to? And, it's putting all that together so that when it comes to race day, it's the perfect plan. You know exactly what's going to happen. And if that plan doesn't, something, changes your plan, you can easily adapt and it's not going to throw you off. So
What
yeah,
what
all
is
those little things.
what has changed in terms of sports science or sports medicine, even the staff? I remember being there kind of by myself with 20 athletes. Has it grown at all in the 12 or 15 years? Or just I know the technology always continues to grow, but has the sports med or the sports science changed at all since I met you in 2007?
Yeah, a lot of that has changed. Unfortunately, the funding hasn't changed a whole lot. So,
Okay.
we do rely on volunteers a lot of the time to help with us, as you know, and spend a good amount of time doing that. But yeah, we now travel part time with sports psychologists, as well as a nutritionist, to help us. And we have different programs just even in the off season, different devices to help us focus more, and to, again, a lot of it has to do with recovery, and be able to, again, train as at a high
Sure.
level as long as we can too. And again, part of that is recovery.
Yeah, and I think that's why the education level of bobsled was I could see that because there was more mature. It was a more mature athlete who was willing to learn. It's no shot at young athletes. It's just they don't know what they don't know. And you'd have these mature athletes that are like, I need to do more. I'm going to do everything I can. And it was always fun to work with them. You have a woman from the she was Canadian born she's been on the US team for a while and she just got her citizenship. I've never met her. Is it Kaillie, or how do you pronounce her first name?
Kaillie.
Kaillie Humphries. So she's known for winning. She's really good. Can you
Yep.
Explain that situation a little bit so people are more aware?
Yeah, Kaillie, she was an alternate for the 2006 Olympics as a push athlete. And so she's been around a long time as a great pusher. Started driving right after that and raced with Canada for a couple Olympics, actually.
Hmm.
And she's won gold medals and she's won world championships and all kinds of things. She's married now to an American. And so part of her becoming an American citizen was now she'd like to compete, and call her home the United States. And so we did as much as we could and try to support her, as any American born athlete would, and she's, part of our team, and we're really, glad she's a part, and not just because she wins, but because, she's a great person, a great leader. She just brings the program up to another level just by being around so many other athletes.
She can help lead, but she also competes still at a high level, I assume, right?
Yeah. She's the defending world champion now in both two women and monobob too.
Okay.
And so we have high expectations for both her and Elena coming into Beijing.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I have a couple more questions for you. These are people that have been around the program for a long time. I was only around for a few years, but I realize their significance. And the first one is Lenny Kasten. This guy does everything. He's passionate. He's into it. He runs around. He supports you guys. Can you explain his value to the program and what he's meant? Because he's been there a long time, from what I understand.
No, I can't. Honestly, what he does for our program, and to try to describe what he does is not easy to put into words.
He's the general manager. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And now, he helps with so many things that, nobody will ever see, even he's helping people behind the scenes kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's, making sure that, we have chains for our rental cars, when we're driving in the snow, or, making sure that, nobody ever questions, if our flights are going to be on time, because, he has a backup for a backup plan, and, things like that. But more than that too, yeah. he takes pride in his job, and it shows to the athletes. The athletes know that, he's there in their corner, and, he's going to do everything he can to help us win. If it's just 100th of a second here or there, that's what he takes pride in doing. And his story was, he came from the Ukraine in 1980 and defected to the United States. And, but I don't know a more American person than Lenny Kasten.
Now he was in New Jersey. He used to call it Gangster Paradise or something.
Yeah.
With the schnapps.
Yeah. Hilarious too, because, one of his accent, but, two, he's, so relatable as a person. He now lives in Florida, actually.
Well, I liked how he approached his relationships with people. He was not only thinking about this upcoming games, but future ones, and never crossing anyone. And a lot of people don't realize how much other countries will lean on us for help or assistance. We have it in medical. We'll have it with the managers of the team and the directors, which is something to be proud of, because other countries need help. Every country's limited on resources, but his character was really noted, and he wasn't out to start trouble or drama. So, and he seemed to be friends with everyone. So
yeah, I think he was heavily relied on, again, not just by our country, but all the teams competing. They had problems with the passport or something. They call him, and he could give them a connection that he knew to overnight, something, whatever it was. He just seemed to help every country be at their best.
Sure. And one more person who I don't know that well, and I'm hoping you can explain. This is Byron Craighead. So I met him over and over. I'm there to kind of treat, and he was very close to you guys, much more than I ever was. And can you explain? He's an athletic trainer, I believe he's a massage therapist. Can you explain his value to the program and what he's done?
Again, hard to put into words. And I don't even know what his medical credentials are because, he did whatever it took to get us into shape physically. But, and that was the easy part of his job, or, as we saw it, what he really brought to the team. And I don't want to call him a mascot, because that sounds
sure
degrading a little bit, but he was an inspiration. I remember. Okay, so when I would push, I'd try to get as fired up as I could. I'd listen to music, and I'd do breathing techniques, and spit and slobber, and bang my head against walls, whatever I had to do. And I remember for the 2009 World Championships, the 2-man race. It was in Lake Placid, and I was walking out to the start line, and I could have swore that there's no way I could have gotten more fired up at that moment. I remember he grabbed me by the helmet and he looked me in the eye and he said, "Go make a effing memory," and, just slapped me in the head. And that took me from here to here. And I remember, well, I don't even remember
That's
pushing.
awesome.
Like I was mentally just in another state. And I always look back at that, and that kind of summarized what he meant to the program. And, another quick story about Byron, and this was a hard one, but in 2014 at the Olympics, he had a little bit of a hard situation, I guess. And
I remember that.
Yeah. And so days before we competed, he had to be sent home, from the village. And he took it harder than any athlete would have taken it, if they were disqualified or had, sent home early or anything. He hugged me, and, by the time we were done hugging, my shirt was soaked because he was just crying, because he felt he was letting us down. And, that's how much he believed in us. And
he wasn't
a huge part of our team.
I could appreciate how disappointed he would be. And we've discussed this with speed skating, but the risk of COVID, people getting sick over the next 6 weeks or whatever till the games. Can you just talk about how risky that is, and how it could just derail someone's, year?
Yeah, so this is tough, and sadly, this is taking a large part of my job now is COVID planning, and it takes away from performance planning to some degree. And
Okay.
we have to have plans in place for not just COVID situations, but contact tracing, and limiting the number of people that we can be around, and how does that affect our pre-Olympic training camp? And
Sure.
of course, travel is a mess now, and at the same time, we don't know what each country's rules are going to be in the next few years or a few months. Sorry, they're going to change, and we have to adapt. And I've heard from the games in Tokyo that the athletes still felt rewarded. The whole experience was rewarding, but it was definitely different. Without fans in the stands, without friends and family there. All of that is a little bit different, but it's still the Olympics. And so, our job and the athlete's job is still to focus and compete as if COVID didn't exist, but you can't ignore that COVID does exist. And so we need to be ready and have 7 or 8 contingency plans.
Well, I wish you guys the best. I respect the program so much, and from afar, it's great to just see the success you've had, and I know you have great people involved. You being there, I respect everything you've done for U.S. sport, but just who you are as a person, and I support you no matter what. But I expect great things for you guys, and I wish you the best, and be safe, and go USA.
I really appreciate it, Eric. It's good to chat with you and catch up a little bit.